Thanks for your patience. We just finished up our executive session. No formal action was taken. We're going to go ahead and move right into our open meeting. We'll start it out with the consent agenda. Are there any questions at all on the consent items? There's warrants, minutes, and then I don't have it in front of me. One other thing, I'm opening up my computer right now. And a donation. I have one quick one because I was signing checks on the warrants. Elevator, that charge, is that just a 1 year, like all maintenance and operation inspections? It's for the building, for the elevator here?
I believe so, but I can double check and make sure.
I meant to ask you before I left today. Okay. Thanks. And then did everyone see the questions before the board on the donation? No need to, we don't need a not a forum, just making sure you saw those.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thanks. We got a motion and a second. Go ahead, Macy.
Trustee Miller,
Yes.
Trustee Ty,
Yes.
Trustee Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Maris,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon,
Can't hear you, Tanya.
oh, I see. All right,
Go ahead. Nicole might be, she was driving home to
okay.
do the rest of the meeting, so she might be on. You can ask, call her out and see. Oh,
Don't see her on. So we'll just note for the record that Mayor Pro Tem Sterling and Trustee Corvalon are here with us this evening. They are just absent from the vote on the consent agenda.
Oh, hey, I don't know what happened, but I was unable to mute my thing. It was like
cool.
blocked, but it looks like it's okay now.
Thank you. What's your thoughts on consent agenda? Yay or nay?
Yeah, it's fine. The consent agenda, yes.
Thank you. All right, so we got to vote.
Just 1 second.
All right. So the motion was approved. We just got yeses from all the trustees except for Mayor Pro Tem Sterling, who should be joining us again shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our first action item and our only action item of the evening, potholing project for lead and copper rule revisions. That does not mean creating more potholes. Go ahead. And Andrew, when you're ready, I think you are introducing this to us.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry about that. So this is a follow-up to a discussion item during staff reports at a previous meeting, I believe the last meeting, where we brought some background to the board about this regulation and the alternatives for coming into compliance with the regulation. The direction we received from the board was to move forward with pursuing the potholing project this year. At the time, the assumption was that we needed to do a supplemental budget because the estimates came in around $200,000. After that meeting, I was able to clarify with the engineering firm that's providing technical guidance on behalf of the state for us on this. I was able to confirm that as long as we can confirm the material of the pipe 18 inches from the water meter, we only need one pothole instead of two outside the house. So we anticipate that to cut the scope of the work for this project nearly in half. And we now believe we can fund the project with this year's budget using savings from other budget line items. And those projected savings are outlined in the agenda memo. I'm happy to field any questions.
Any clarifying questions for Andrew?
Is this still going to be completed like before the snow falls?
I don't know if it'll be before the snow falls, but the contractor has communicated to me that they want to do it. They want to start with 2 crews up here, and I think that they can get it done in about 10 working days.
So before the ground freezes, that's all it really matters.
Yeah, yeah.
More questions for Andrew?
Tomorrow we'll get some sleep.
Did you, we didn't bother with RFP, or how are we gonna, or were you just looking at the,
I drafted like a request for quotes and sent that same document to 5 different contractors. 2 contractors responded. 3 contractors didn't respond who were local excavators. I spoke to 2 of them who thought that they couldn't compete with the businesses we reached out to, and they didn't seem upset about it, but just different equipment. Their a vacuum potholing machine will be able to do this work much more cost effectively than an excavator with a machine.
I just wanted to add, our fiscal policy says that I have the wherewithal to determine whether an RFP is necessary. And although the scope of this project is rather large, it's digging a hole at each property and scratching a pipe. And so I thought that ultimately, because of the complexity of the work, it would be okay to proceed the way that Andrew mentioned.
that sounds great. Any other clarifying questions for Andrew? If not, we'll go to public comment. Any public comment from folks in the room, Jim? If not, folks online, any public comment for folks about the potholing project to determine heavy metals in the water lines? Okay. With that, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and a motion. And anything to discuss or more clarifying questions that may come to you?
One question. In the savings, the first line item, it talks about postponement of fire mitigation work. Is there a particular fire mitigation work we're not doing this year, or?
Yeah, so this was a line item that we budgeted without a lot of planning ahead of time. It was a general concern about trees near our water pump station near the creek and our water treatment plant, because they're more in more forested areas. Maya with the Border Watershed Collective walked our sites and expressed a little concern about, we have plenty of space between our buildings and the trees. And so I'm comfortable moving this. And I think what we'd like to do is, Maya has a forester as part of our organization, and she's offered to have them walk all of our sites, and potentially make this a larger project. I've also heard, so that's what, that's the reason.
There's also a mitigation grant that Andrew, Nikki, and I have been considering whether we can apply for, and we're just looking at the match for the program. But it's a $100,000 grant that could be used for the water plant and then some of the parks work.
Awesome, great. And I won't make any comment about the lower GIS expenses, but.
She's too good, too quick.
Any other questions for Andrew?
I move to approve resolution 2024-36, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Nederland authorizing the mayor to execute the professional service agreement, Kinetic Energy Services LLC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, Macy?
Trustee Larson,
Yes.
trustee Maris,
Yes.
trustee Miller,
Yes.
trustee Ty,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling,
Yes.
trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
Thank you. And Mayor Billy,
Yes.
thank you. Motion has been approved.
Thank you.
And Macy, I arrived at 7:09.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone. With that, we'll go into our first discussion item of the evening, model traffic code. I think Jennifer is this year.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees, Jennifer Madsen, the town attorney. So this agenda item is to introduce the adoption of the 2024 edition of the Model Traffic Code. So as stated in the aim, local governments can enact traffic regulations on roads and streets within their jurisdictions. So balancing this ability to regulate local traffic with the desire to have uniformity between jurisdictions, CDOT has put together what's called the Model Traffic Code. And most governments adopt the Model Traffic Code. There are some exceptions. I think Denver, Aurora, they have their own traffic codes. But the Model Traffic Code is essentially based on state statute. So CDOT every couple of years updates the Model Traffic Code to incorporate state statutes, new traffic laws that have been enacted since their last update. So Nederland adopted the 2020 Model Traffic Code. And this is the next version. The 2024 was just published by CDOT earlier this year. It has all laws, all traffic laws through the 2023 legislative session. The aim included subject matters that the Model Traffic Code regulates. Boulder County Sheriff's Office is in support of updating the Model Traffic Code. I attached a Lions update. They just did theirs to the 2024 code. And in adopting this code, we would need to implement new laws that were adopted by the legislature this year in 2024. Those would be added as amendments. So that would be updates to your mobile device. The legislature changed the laws on that to make it more strict. And then also updated the automated vehicle identification system. And that was something that the board had talked about last year related to speed radar and red light cameras. The board didn't talk about red light cameras, but the photo radar for speeding. And so if you included those, then it would be easier for Nederland to go ahead and implement them. So like I said, Sheriff's Office is in support, and that's an overview. Anybody have any questions?
I don't know if this is a question for you or not, but I mean, why did Lions choose to make their own modifications to the traffic code? Oops. And what does that involve? Like, you know, from a legal perspective, obviously they rewrote some very
This, you know, Lions works with Boulder County Sheriff's Office. So this may be recommendations from Boulder County Sheriff's Office. So I would work closely with Sergeant Mendez in working on this ordinance to make sure that it's what they want and what they need. Sometimes, you know, one of the things that I asked Sergeant Mendez about is regulations related to engine braking, Jake brakes. If that's something that would be of interest, we could add that in. And another thing that I don't see in the Lions code, and this is something that I was talking with Town Administrator Kane about earlier today, is updating some parking regulations. Oftentimes, parking regulations are part of your traffic code section. And so if the board provides direction to go ahead and update the 2024 code, we could also look at evaluating whether there should be some parking regulations also changed.
We've had a pretty big conversation recently about people parking in right of way on certain, not all town streets, but some town streets. And it really impacts our team's ability to work in the street when necessary. If somebody's parked on a pothole or a manhole or something, for instance, or in the wintertime when we're trying to plow and we're trying to move around vehicles that are parked in the right of way or campers in the right of way. So one of the things we've talked about is, should we start thinking about how we enforce those violations? Could we do it seasonally? And that's something that staff would really like to explore, just so that we can maintain our operations a little bit better. And it wouldn't be the same everywhere, just certain areas. And then the other question is, with our contract with the sheriff's office being the way it is unlikely that some of these violations are ever going to be dealt with, just because of the priority nature of them. So the other question would be, should we give somebody on town staff, and it would be probably either me or somebody like Britt potentially, or maybe Macy, the ability to write violations for this code, because we know that the sheriff's office isn't going to be able to do it. So that person could potentially write code violations for other code issues or for parking violations. And so those kind of the direction that conversation has gone so far, about what additional regulations might look like or how we might want to think about them. The other thing would be, do we want to consider, with the paid parking program potentially coming in, do we want to create residential parking only zones, so you don't get people trying to freeload into the parking system and parking in residential areas, which is something some communities do. And that would give some additional ways to think about cars and everything. You wouldn't want to limit people, but you could make it so outside people couldn't necessarily park somewhere. So those are the things that we've been talking about kind of at a high level.
Jennifer, you raised the one thing, the Jake breaks. Because I don't know why, but just over the weekend they were particularly loud. But if anything we do regarding that, can it be applied to the peak to peak, or because that's in town but not ours?
Yeah, CDOT has said that
Okay.
that municipalities can regulate the engine brakes, Jake brakes, and that if we do it a certain way, and they like the regulations, put up a sign that says that engine brakes are prohibited.
Well, I throw out there that I'd be in favor of that, having listened to about a dozen of them come down past the community center this weekend early in the morning.
Mhm. Any other clarifying questions?
Yeah, I mean, about the noise of the traffic, we had just said that the sheriff's not gonna be handling that. The noise of like J breaks and motorcycles and stuff, so certainly Macy's not gonna be out there stopping traffic. And I mean, you need a police to pull someone over for that kind of violation, so I don't understand what the point is of having it if we can't enforce it.
I may have misspoke. We do have officers patrolling the streets, so they will be doing traffic violations, moving traffic violations. It's just when it comes to a code violation, like say you had noxious weeds had taken over a yard, that's a more difficult one to have a sheriff write for, or like a car parked in the wrong spot when it's not a safety hazard, essentially.
Oh,
So that's
gotcha.
where I was thinking it might be good to have somebody else help with
I
that.
would love to give somebody in town staff the power to do that. And okay, that makes sense then. So then if somebody is coming down with, and they happen to be sitting at the community center, they could then pull them over and get them a ticket.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Questions? If not, we'll go to public comment. Any public comment on this discussion item, model traffic code? Folks online, any public comment on adopting the updated model traffic code? Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll bring it back to the board. The question before the board are on page 45. Staff seeks direction from the Board of Trustees related to work on an ordinance for the adoption of the current version of the Model Traffic Code 2024. Addition, the town attorney would work with Boulder County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Jennifer Mendez on this draft ordinance.
I think there's a lot of interesting things that Lyons has chosen to change in this. I mean, even things as minor as like adding a court surcharge of $35 that gets paid to the town, the town clerk to offset the cost of contracting with Boulder County Sheriff's Department. Like that's pretty clever. So I would, I think it's worth reading through Lyons changes with Sergeant Mendez and getting her input, and then also, with John's input and Attorney Madsen to kind of maybe pick and choose a little bit of the things that they decided to change. Because, they're kind of in the same boat of contracting with the Sheriff's Department to deal with a lot of these things. And they also do prohibit dynamic braking systems, which I assume constitutes Jake brakes and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at what Lyons is doing would be worth researching. I know they also, and this may not be tied to this, but they allow golf carts on everything but the they can cross over the CDOT road, but otherwise they can run around throughout town. And it seems kind of impractical here, but so does Jamestown, turns out.
Don't we as well?
Do we?
I think we modified ours years ago, and the big problem was the people who had the golf cart really wanted to be able to drive from the north side of town to the south side of town. The only way to do that was the bridge, that's CDOT, and that's
Gotcha.
where you're
Okay.
getting the vehicle was
Okay.
them riding along the peak
All right,
across
cool.
the bridge.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely am not attached to
Yep.
that one. I was just curious more.
Discussion.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
It'd be great for getting around Old Town, though.
Yeah, or up and down. Big Springs. I mean, weather-wise, it'd be kind of limited, but anyways, I'm not stuck on it. I was just curious.
Nothing
I
we
know.
can do to the model traffic code for Nederland specifically could address the bridge. Because I mean, you said we get to like make up our own rules that CDOT says we can do, right?
Well, no.
To a degree?
No,
Yeah, not that though.
No.
That hasn't changed.
no, that
All right.
hasn't changed.
But otherwise, looking at what Lyons has done does sound like a good suggestion. Thanks. Thanks, Luke. Other comments or thoughts or directives for Jennifer?
Do snowmobiles fit in this situation?
On right of way?
Yeah, like if somebody were to want to ride their snowmobile, through town in the winter. I mean, I know there's a lot of mountain towns that, they have like a little snowmobile road on the side of the main highway or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't ever looked at that before, but so you're saying you would want to allow snowmobiles or not?
Well, I think it's something we should consider if that,
Okay.
I'm not
What the
proposing
impact
one or the
is
other,
on
like,
snowmobiles.
yeah, what I've definitely seen people riding their snowmobiles,
Okay.
On town streets. And I have a lot of people asking like, oh, can I drive my snowmobile? Especially when we get 4 feet of snow.
So Luke, on page 226 of the model traffic code, it says snowmobiles are included or are described as a vehicle within this code.
So does that mean they have to have a license plate?
Yeah, I haven't gotten that far, but I do know that they describe vehicle. A snowmobile is described as a vehicle within this code. It says vehicle includes without limitation a bicycle, electric assisted bicycle, but does not include a wheelchair, off-highway vehicle, or snowmobile, farm tractor, or implement. So sorry,
Right.
it does not
Yeah.
include.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, so I think that would be something that I'd like to see us at least come up with a definitive answer to of, what's allowed in town during the winter.
Any other requests? So do we have not a floor for town staff, Jennifer to keep working?
Yes.
So one thing I'm thinking too, this is an ordinance that's typically adopted by reference because you're adopting the model traffic code. So it would be done similar to the way that the town is adopting the National Electrical Code, which you have your first reading on consent, and then you have your action item to approve the ordinance. It sounds like there might be a little bit more discussion on this. So I'm thinking it might be better to bring it back as a discussion item first, and then we can incorporate some of the things related to parking and have a more robust discussion about it before bringing it back on consent.
Sounds good. Ballpark of how much time you'd want. Give yourself a buffer.
I mean, maybe October.
1st or 15th?
Either. I don't know about the parking. What do you for parking discussion?
I'd almost say the 15th, just to
Yeah.
make sure we get across the finish line.
Sounds good. Great. Thank you. Are we good? You got what you need, Jennifer? Have what you need?
Yes, thanks.
Great. With that, we'll go to our second discussion item of the evening, the Home Rule Charter. Jennifer?
Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen here. So there are a couple members of the board. I think it was back in June. I mentioned to you that I was presenting at the Colorado Municipal League annual conference on home rule charters, and there was a request to provide the presentation to the board on home rule charters. And so I'm going to go ahead and give that presentation. It's typically an hour, but I won't spend as long as I did at the conference. So let's see here. So for the agenda, I will give you a brief overview of what it means to be a home rule municipality, and we'll explore why the topic is particularly relevant to statutory communities. And so this understanding will set the stage for everything else that we talk about today. Next, I'll talk about the process of approving a home rule charter. This involves several steps, including asking voters to form a home rule charter commission. We'll then discuss what happens if the voters approve this initiative, including steps that are required to draft the home rule charter and ultimately obtain voter approval of the proposed charter. And after that, I'll share briefly, I'll go over a case study of how this process played out in the town of Keystone. And that's why I was asked to present at CML, is because I helped the town of Keystone draft their charter. So what is home rule? First, home rule municipality is governed by the local citizens rather than by the state government. It means that the powers of the municipality are derived from the charter and ordinances and not state statutes. Essentially, home rule creates freedom from the need for state enabling legislation and provides protection from state interference in local and municipal matters. In Colorado, the home rule authority comes from the Constitution, and this constitutional provision has been in place since the early 1900s. This section of the Constitution empowers citizens of cities and towns to adopt a charter, giving them control over their local government. Home rule offers significant benefits. as I just mentioned, local control. A home rule municipality is under the control of local citizens rather than state government. Independent authority powers are derived from the municipality's own charter and ordinances. Legislative freedom, home rule eliminates the need for state enabling legislation. Protection from interference, it provides protection from interference from the state in local and municipal matters. And judges, when this issue comes up in litigation, judges have often underscored the power of home rule in various rulings. The judges affirm that home rule municipalities can utilize diverse powers, organizations, and procedures without needing any state enabling legislation. Understanding and implementing home rule can significantly impact how a municipality operates and maintains its independence and efficiency. It allows for more tailored governance that meets the specific needs of the local community. So now that I have your interest in what a home rule is, let me talk about how you would go about going home rule if that was something that you were interested in. So it requires the approval of the voters in the municipality, and this essentially involves two separate elections. The first election is to ask the voters whether a charter commission should be formed to draft a proposed charter. And then the second election is when the voters decide on that proposed charter itself. So how would we get to the first election? There are two ways to get there. One is through the adoption of an ordinance by the governing body calling for an election. That's the simple way. The second way would be a petition signed by 5% of the registered electors in the municipality. So I'm going to just take a brief pause here and explain or talk a bit about briefly why a statutory municipality such as Nederland wouldn't want to become home rule. First reason is cost. And I know this has come up several times previously, and I think cost has been a limiting factor that the Board of Trustees had discussed. The not just money, but also resources. You need to have people that would be interested in being involved on the Home Rule Charter Commission, and it would also take staff resources as well. There's also the possibility that you could have a restrictive charter that's drafted, and a restrictive charter potentially can limit your authority as a jurisdiction, can reduce your powers. And then the last thing is that some people are against home rule because they feel that home rule municipality has an increase in government authority, increase in government power, and some local citizens might see this increase of power as a disadvantage. Okay. So for the Charter Commission, Nederland would be, you need to have 9 members on the commission. And once you would, if you were to adopt an ordinance, then you would have to have people run for the Charter Commission. It would be just like any other town election, and candidates would need to submit petitions signed by at least 25 electors. So if that goes to an election, you have
Signed by 25 electors.
yeah,
So that's more than we
yep,
only need 10 for this.
it is. It is.
What happens if you don't have 9 people signed up? Does the board then have a way to, or if somebody signs up and then quits, do we have to have another election?
Well, who's talking? We can't hear you.
So I was asking about, contingencies, if somebody is elected and then has to drop off the commission, does the board reappoint? If we have less than 9 people apply, do we have backfill ability?
The board can definitely appoint if somebody resigns and there's a vacancy. If there aren't 9 members, I mean, you really need to have 9 members. So you need to have 9 people running in the election. So that's potentially an issue, is if you just don't have the volunteer interest in being on the charter commission.
And those are volunteer positions.
Yes. Yep.
Any idea what kind of time commitment that was for people in Keystone?
It was, we met every week for about 3 months. But you could, and they did it pretty quickly.
Like an hour, 2 hours, or what?
It was probably about 2 hours. Yeah.
But this is kind of like a one-time process. This isn't an ongoing.
Right. You're getting, what the Charter Commission is doing is they're drafting essentially your constitution for your municipality. And I'll go into topics that are typically provided for in your charter.
And they have to finish the draft within 180 days after the election.
Exactly. Yeah.
The green light.
And then once the draft is done, then the commission is disbanded.
Well, then it's voted on.
Okay.
And if it's approved, then the commission is disbanded. Yes. Okay. So you have your charter commission that's formed, governing
Just
body,
a sec. And if it's not approved the first time around,
and you have a
it's
second.
sent back to
chance.
the drawing board for 180 days.
Yeah. So you have your first meeting that's set by the governing body. You have to elect a chair and a secretary, adopt rules of procedures. It is a open meeting, so all your meetings are open to the public. And reasonable expenses of the commission are paid by the municipality, but your commission members are volunteers. So the state law provides that the commission has certain powers. They can employ staff, retain experts, conduct interviews, make investigations. They can also accept funds and grants. So what's the work of the proposed charter? Like I said, it is your municipality's constitution. You need to hold, the Charter Commission would need to hold one public hearing on the adoption of the charter. For Keystone, all of the other meetings were work session meetings, and so there was no public comment during those work session meetings. Public could obviously write into the commission and provide feedback. So 180 days after the election, you must submit the proposed charter to the governing body, and then the governing body calls for an election, sets a ballot title, and it must be approved by voters. One thing to note is the Charter Commission submits the proposed charter to the governing body, but the governing body has no authority to strike out, revise, change the charter. It's just really more an administrative matter of accepting the charter and then setting an election. So in your home rule charter, there are certain provisions that are required to be included. You must include initiative provisions, referendum provisions, recall, what happens to your existing ordinances, and a prefatory synopsis. And then here are a list, and this might be hard for you to read, of other home rule charter provisions that are typically included in charters. So form of government, do you want a council manager type of government? Do you want a strong mayor government? There's other types of governments that you could include in your charter. What is the size of the elected body. You can change the size of your elected body in the charter. What are election procedures? Are you going to be elected at large, or are you going to create districts? Oftentimes there's discussion of boards and commissions. How are ordinances adopted? So Netherlands follows state statute in adopting ordinances. If you drafted a charter, you could change how you were to adopt ordinances. Typically, you have a couple of key positions included in the charter, such as your town manager, legal position, judicial, and how those are appointed, how you can hire and fire those people. There's sometimes provisions on budget and financing, eminent domain. And there's also a process in the charter section of state statute that allows a charter commission to submit alternate versions of charter provisions to the voters to say, do you want option A or do you want option B? Erie just also adopted a charter, and they had an alternate provision, and I'm not remembering what their alternate provision was, but they use that tool. Okay. So once the charter is approved, it has to be filed with the Colorado Secretary of State. If there's an amendment to the charter, and this is huge, is it has to go to a vote. So charter is very difficult to change, but that's good. Oops. You can also form a new charter commission to maybe study and evaluate your charter. One of the things that I've heard from other municipalities is sometimes that's considered when you have a charter that's really outdated, that might have just really old language, have gender specific language, have arcane rules. And so then you might form another charter commission. There's also a process for repealing a charter. So I can talk briefly about Keystone and just some of the key issues that they considered. And what this will do will highlight a little bit about how you can make your charter, should the board decide to go this way, should the community decide to go explore becoming home rule, how you can make your charter really fit your community. So in in Keystone, there's approximately 1,200 registered electors. It's about 2 miles in size. But one of the huge issues and it is not necessarily an issue, but one of their challenges is that they have a significant number of second homeowner population. They have approximately 2,000 short-term rental licenses. And that came into play in working on the charter. The commission did meet weekly, 14 meetings. The first meeting was basically organizational, and third meeting was talking about goals. So in the meeting format, the way that the meetings worked is I would draft a memo to the Charter Commission outlining the topics that we would discuss each week. And then we would meet, discuss, and informally agree, or they'd agree on, provide direction on those particular charter provisions. They did have a couple meetings where they interviewed elected officials and town managers of the surrounding communities in Summit County to ask questions. And their situation was a little bit unique because not only was Keystone becoming home rule, but they were also becoming a brand new town. So they needed to learn a lot in that regard. They did hold 2 town halls with public hearings. So their goal was to create an enabling charter. They wanted to be able to say that they were home rule, and later on to be able to enact ordinances, levy different types of taxes, act in a way that statutory municipalities can't act. And they wanted a one source document for their basic operations. They chose a council manager form of government. Keystone did put term limits into its charter. In the Charter Commission, they said by April 2026, code of ethics needed to be in place. Attendance at meetings were very important to them. And so they have attendance requirements for their elected officials in the charter. And it was also important that they have their manager be a part of the community. So they put in their charter that the manager must reside in Summit County. They did discuss the recall initiative and referendum. And these numbers are a little bit higher. Recall, I think, is the same percentage of signers that are needed on a recall petition, but initiative and referendum, I believe, are a little bit higher. So one of the big issues, and this goes back,
What's our percentage for referendum?
it's spelled out in state statute. I think
Which is?
it's 5%,
Okay.
I think. So like I said, one of the big issues was second homeowners. So one of the things that a home rule municipality can do is they can decide who votes on issues. It doesn't have to be the registered municipal electorate and its primary resident as is defined in state statute that votes in Nederland. It can be broader than that. So the town of Mountain Village allows their property owners to vote. You don't have to be a primary resident. You just own property. So that was a huge issue that Keystone had to decide. Are we going to let all of these second homeowners vote in our election and essentially run the government, have a lot of control of the government? And they decided, no, we're not going to do that. And in fact, they put in the charter that you have to be a primary resident. So that means that later on, they can't adopt an ordinance giving second homeowners that right. They did, though, allow non-primary residents to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission and on other boards and commissions. So the Keystone Charter was approved. It was approved by an overwhelming majority, 83%. And here are some other unique home rule provisions that are in charters, other charters, not in Keystones. One unique provision is that I believe it's the town of Frisco says that the municipal court is exclusive jurisdiction for claims against the municipality. Which means that if somebody wants to file a lawsuit against a town, they have to go to municipal court to file that lawsuit. Other municipalities in their charter have employee residency requirement in the charter that employees must reside in the municipality. Single subject rules in elections. And like I said, voter qualifications is another provision.
What's a single subject rule in election?
So that this is primarily for initiatives, that if you have voters who submit an initiative petition, that the municipality could throw out the petition because it has too many topics in that initiative petition. So that would be something you could include. So that's it.
I have a question too about the exclusive jurisdiction. Does that mean that the judge that hears the case against the town is the judge that's hired by the town?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, interesting.
So that's it. Happy to answer any questions. And really this is, this is informational, and it's, up for you all to decide whether this is something that you would be interested in doing, maybe exploring some more.
With the town of Keystone, you said you served as their legal counsel during the whole process, prepping memos, et cetera. Do you have an idea on kind of what the overall cost to the town was for pursuing home rule?
I did ask well, it's now the mayor, he was a chair of the Charter Commission. I asked him the cost, and he told me that it was in the ballpark of $30,000.
I have a question. How soon after the referendum or the vote for the charter is approved or the ordinance does the commission have to be formed?
I believe it's the first meeting must be within 30 days of the election is my memory. It's in state statute, but I think it's 30 days. So, I mean, they got to get to work right away, really.
More clarifying questions? Jennifer, John?
In your experience, I mean, obviously Keystone was a successful home rule decision. How often is it that the town goes through the process and then it's voted down? Is that common?
I don't know that it's common. I think the challenging point and where if this is something that the Board of Trustees would really want to do is you would want to be able to explain to the voters why this is important to Nederland, what's the benefit, would they see any changes in town and what would be the benefit? One of my firm's other clients, I know that they have gone to an election twice and been unsuccessful both times.
The first election, the one to initiate the process is what's failed twice?
Yes,
Okay.
that.
I was gonna say that argument was the one you'd have to make at the beginning, not after the work of the committee.
Yeah, I mean, all of you would have to really spend some time thinking about what is the benefit to Nederland to be home rule. And it really is that local control, being able to do things without having to point to a state statute to say, oh, here, this is why we can do it because the state statute says we can. So one of the big areas is taxes, different types of taxes. That's a huge difference between home rule and statutory municipalities.
I think I remember, we've talked about this before, like over 90% of the population of Colorado live in home rule towns.
Yeah, I think that it's about 100 municipalities out of 260 are home rule, but obviously the larger municipalities are almost all home rule.
For Keystone and for that other municipality you were just talking about, do you know how much or if any like community outreach, like what was the community outreach looking like talking about the benefits about home rule before the first election?
So Keystone, there was a ton of outreach. I mean, just so much. Keystone was and still is a population that is heavily influenced by HOAs. Many of the homes are in HOAs, and the HOAs are very important to Keystone. So there was a lot of outreach to HOAs, a lot of discussion as to why home rule was important, and just the explanation that we need to be able to have this ability up front. And for them, it was an easy time to do it because they had incorporated, and there was a way to incorporate and become home rule at the same time. The other client is the town of Lochbuie. They had problems getting people to be interested to serve on the charter commission. And I think that the town staff and the board of trustees there just didn't do a great job of explaining to the voters, this is why we really need this.
When it comes to the membership of that charter commission, obviously they need to be residents of the town of Nederland, much like, planning commission or this board. Is it typical, or can trustees serve, or is that something where it's like you can't hold 2 seats simultaneously?
Yeah, that's not really set out in state statute. I know Lochbuie, their board of trustees, members of the board of trustees actually were running for the charter commission.
How
More
long
questions?
does
Go
the
ahead.
process take from the forming of the charter commission to coming up with the charter estimate?
Well, it has to be done within 180 days. You have to draft that charter within 180 days. As I mentioned,
So, okay, cool. So
Yeah.
6 months.
yes, Keystone's was abbreviated, so it doesn't have to be 6 months. It can be a shorter time frame.
And as Chris said, you have to be a member of Nederland to be on the
Yes.
charter committee. Yes.
You do. Yep.
Up to 6 months till you finish the draft, and it's a certain amount of time to do the election. And then if it were to be approved, how many days you said 30 days after that election, you have to start making steps to make it happen?
No. So you mean after your charter is approved?
Say it gets approved by the electorate, the people in town.
Yeah.
Then what's the time frame?
Well, I mean, that would be something, it depends on how many changes you have. What is it going to look like for Nederland? I mean, would you change the size of your governing body? You'd have to talk about what's the effect of the ordinances. Are ordinances still effective? I mean, that would seem probably the most efficient thing to do would be to have your ordinances still in place, but you would go through a transition.
Okay.
This is Tanya. It would be helpful if we did go through this to have our ordinances and everything in our codes kind of with a check mark. We're saying these aren't negotiable, these are state statute. And then what is negotiable, like, so when we're writing the charter, what are things to even discuss versus things that are, or what the things that are check marked are saying things that have currently, but we've been handcuffed by state statute. It would be nice to know what those items are that have been plaguing us. Every few months or so we hear from you like, oh well, that's state statute, so we can't change it. It would be nice to have a cheat sheet of that. Is that something that could happen if we choose to go through this process?
Yeah, maybe some of the, like a list of the most troublesome state statutes, or
Yeah, like
the
based
biggest-
on
the
our
biggest
town
cons.
code and our ordinances, which are the ones that have been created simply because they're state statute? Which are the ones that if we go home rule, we can actually wiggle with? just to
Right.
see if it's worth if it's even, is this and that would be something you would tell the voters, like, hey, these are certain things that we can adjust if we do home rule, and that people have been complaining about, perhaps. It's just like a way to explain it easier and for me to understand better, like, what are the things that have been plaguing us. I know it was like a lot to do with the election. The specific amount of time has to pass between, when we nominated somebody, and there's a lot of election stuff. I know that, but yeah, it's all like out of my brain already, and so it'd be nice to have a cheat sheet for that's what something I think about.
Yeah, I could do that. I mean, I could brainstorm things that Nederland would benefit by if you decided to be home rule.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I just know we've talked about this many times, and I just can't remember specifically the times where we've been like, oh, well, state statute, and we're feeling handcuffed
Yeah.
by it. And
One
it's
of the
happened
huge
time.
one of the huge ones, I mean, this always comes to the top of my mind right away, is your lodging tax.
Yeah, that's true
And
too.
yeah, so you have
But
an
I also don't think that that's a selling point for voters. Like, hey, now we can tax you easier. Like, so are
Some
there
voters.
other, what's that?
Some voters, but not others, yeah.
Yeah, well, but we can also, use that to tax other things that aren't short-term rental. Once we're free to tax, then I'm just looking for other, but thank you. Yeah, a cheat sheet would be awesome just for us to reference for the next meeting when we discuss this. I'm in favor of pursuing this personally.
Also in the comprehensive plan, a conversation has come up that it would be valuable to do a code audit and look at our code and, go through our use tables and all of that kind of thing. And it could be a project that would dovetail pretty well.
Yeah. That makes sense, totally. Any more clarifying questions? I want to go to public comment, so we'll come back to talk more specifics after. If not, any public comments on home rule, Jim?
Jim Navratil, living up in Big Springs. I'm having trouble hearing some of this because of my hearing aid, but I wonder if there's any financial disadvantage of getting grants, say like, from the federal government, if you're at home rule.
Yes, please.
No, not at all. It doesn't change. It doesn't change the ability to get grants.
Cool. In either direction, does it improve it or?
Some grants have requirements that are code based, and so but we could change our code too. So I don't really think I think it's kind of I don't really think there'd be anything significant that would change.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Any public comments from folks online?
I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
We can go
Hello?
ahead, Kath. Yeah, we can hear you.
Kathleen Chipai, 33-year resident, 22-year business owner. I'm against home rule. I'm shocked that this is on the ballot when I hear Jen introduce it, that she worked on something for the Colorado Municipal League, and so all of a sudden she's presenting it here in Nederland. I will be core requesting who requested this discussion item. It isn't going to go over well with people when she mentions that taxes is the most wonderful thing out of it. The single subject rule is already a rule in state statute. And Nederland has proven over and over again, it just doesn't like to follow the law. It doesn't like to follow state statute. It's pretty easy. I agree with Tanya that I'd love to see I don't call it a cheat sheet. I'd like to see explanation from Jen Madsen, even though I can't stand the fact that she'll be paid to do this, because this doesn't seem as a priority to me. Put together the problematic statutes that she feels are a problem that need to be changed, because single subject applies statewide on any ballot initiative already. You can already change the number of board members through ordinance. Through a vote. You can already do most of the things I'm sorry, but until Nederland can prove that it can abide by its own code, I think Tanya made a good point. Right now, our code is lost, apparently. And this is a real easy cleanup to get rid of all the problems that the town has gone through. It just swipe it aside and create something new, like none of the rest of it history existed. And I hate to have to bring up, but in totalitarian communities and countries, what do they do first? Is they get rid of the history. So that's how they accomplish moving forward with communistic ways. I just don't think Nederland is ready for this, and I'm really disturbed that it's on the agenda tonight and that the term limits is not on the agenda, because we have someone who's violating the state statute and the state constitution right now. So that's my opinion, and I just don't think there's
You have 30
anything.
seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Thank you, Billy. I don't think that there's anything to gain right now until we get our act together. And being home rule, the public needs to trust the board and trust the people who are going to be on the commission. And right now, trust has been lacking for over a decade. So I think we should work on that. Just the fact that the executive session agenda item
5
wasn't even
seconds.
announced subject matter tonight shows a pure lack of transparency and public
That's your 3
engagement.
minutes if you could wrap it up.
We'll campaign against this.
Thank you. Any other public comments on the home rule charter ordinance? If not, we'll bring it back for discussion. Potential nods. I do think like just one thing I'll say on taxes, like the term of I think it can be misinterpreted when we say we like the idea of, communities like the idea of a homeroom for sake of more taxes. It's more about restructuring how tax money and fee money is gathered or not gathered, and it just allows you to create different ways of how you divide up the money you get already often.
And that still needs to be voted on too, which I
Correct.
think is an important clarification, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't even be part of your charter. It would be a separate vote that would have to be handled pursuant to the taxpayer's Bill of Rights.
My understanding too, because as we've talked about this mostly informally, the last 2 years, but you did you did a presentation on it back in June 22 before I was on the board, but is that more things would go to the public likely for some voting. There's certain things that were, depending on how you structure it, more items would go to the public for votes.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of your charter is you could say that, if town is doing XYZ act, it would need a vote. So you could include that in your charter.
I just have a comment real quick about what Jonathan had said about the audit of our town code. Personally, I would like to see that done first, and then with some highlighting of the areas in which a home rule would give us more freedom, and before we pursue, going through home rule. I think I would like to see the audit first, but with the idea of home rule in it, so that things are highlighted saying, hey, if we are home rule, this is something we have the authority now to tinker with, that we have been handcuffed before. But I really don't feel like we're in a position to just go for home rule before we do this audit of our code. I mean, we have been plagued by missing ordinances and just misconstruing of code and not properly muni code versus paper code. I mean, it's been kind of embarrassing. So I don't really think we should just like Kathleen had mentioned, like scrapping it all and starting over because we're too confused. I think we need to get it all in order I'm not opposed to home rule. I'm kind of in favor of it, but I like to get it all in order and know what we got first. And then I think that would help the committee that does handle the home rule to know what we got first clearly.
Mm-hmm. Good points. What else are folks thinking?
Tanya, I'm with you on the code audit. I think that's definitely something that we would need to do before we talk about home rule, just to have a clear foundation of where we're at. I do have questions about, like, you know, what does this get us in terms of just kind of, you know, zoning or use regulations? Like, you know, do we get the ability to say, hey, you can't build a dispensary there, or you can't build a, you know, gas station or whatever? Like, you know, do we get anything out of this? And as far as like use, you know, within town limits, you know, what property uses are that we don't already have in our use table or couldn't change in our use table? And then also just a question about, you know, are there some examples of, you know, other towns that have used home rule, you know, for citizen benefit? I mean, like, you know, you mentioned the voting thing for Keystone, but that's kind of already our situation, that we, you know, we only allow primary residents to vote. But, you know, are there other examples that anybody has of compelling reasons where that really brought some benefit to the town or the residents because we did home rule?
So one of the examples when we last sort of had this discussion come up about possibly pursuing home rule was things that came out of SAB, Sustainability Advisory Board, where they were pursuing things like, you know, banning plastic bags, banning polystyrene in the town, and basically came up against the discovery that we couldn't do that because we were a statutory town. Home rule towns could do that. And so it was something that, you know, kind of kicked off an idea back then. Since then, the state has changed the rules so we could do it. But that was one example of a few years ago where there was a desire to move forward on some environmental policies that our hands were tied by the state rules, which wouldn't have been the case had we been a home rule municipality.
I think one of the biggest reasons that you want to go home rule is because of local control. And that's ultimately what it's about. It's about Nederland making decisions for Nederland, because sometimes the state legislature is making decisions for such a broad context of places it doesn't fit. It's not a one size fits all solution. So what home rule would allow is for you to be thinking about these things like that and what is the best direction for Nederland and what those initiatives might be, because it's really, there's some flexibility in what that can be ultimately, but it comes down to, do you want the statute to say everything about how Nederland operates, or do you want there to be, you know, this body and the other body that would create that charter to be making those decisions?
I would almost wonder if this would be a topic when we go into our strategic planning as to whether or not we really want to pursue it over the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months. You know, it kind of sounds like some people could be, maybe, but it might be one of those things that we just discuss in strategic planning so that we decide whether or not we're really going to commit to investigating and putting some effort toward it.
That's a good point. I mean, I know in the last go around, you know, we did all our strategic planning, and then, you know, then one of the trustees really wanted to introduce this at the very end, and it was kind of, you know, we already had kind of a full plate, but yeah, probably discussing it as a group together and seeing where it fits, and also kind of pointing out the fact that, you know, the BOT you know, ourselves don't necessarily do a lot with the charter, you know, unless BOT members decide to be on the charter committee, the BOT is really not involved.
Right.
But that is something we have to determine, getting there, and money and, you know, budget and votes, you know, where do we sit with that as a priority now?
Yeah, because it's
Also-
not just, it's budget plus staff time. And if we want them working on this, then that means that they're not working on other things.
And does the community want it too? Which obviously we would find out in an election, but it might be good to do some outreach first laying out some of
survey.
its pros and cons and seeing what the community, what the general idea is of the community before we move forward with planning a whole election too.
That's a great idea.
Our comp plan is supposed to be done in December. So that's when it's coming to you for approval in theory, as long as everything moves forward through planning commission. And then the intention that we talked about during the last board meeting would be that we do a strategic planning session either late this winter or early spring to kind of lay out the next 2 years plan.
After the comp plan.
Right. Yeah. So we have that to kind of dovetail together. I think we could be thinking about this code audit work. It's really the next step after the comp plan, no matter what. And we don't necessarily, just depending on what we find, that could mean various things. So I think we need to determine exactly what we're doing. But then when you think about elections and things like that and like what would be required, that could be like a late summer decision potentially, and just depending on our budget and where we're at. So I think that's the biggest question, is if you would want to budget funds for this or consider budgeting some funds either for the code audit or part of this work next year, and then just when you'd want that to start, because I think that's what we'd be really thinking about, is when that time clock starts for that 180 days.
Well, and just as important to me, or if not as important, is the code audit in relationship to the comprehensive plan. Like, now that we've got the comprehensive plan, what do we need to do differently, and have all of our documents aligned to that? Is that what you were referencing when you said that the code audit has to happen anyway after the comp plan?
Yeah, and I think we've got this is going to dive into the work plan for planning commission that Britt will work with them on as well. So I think there's a lot of pieces that need to get consolidated as that comp plan is considered for approval. Also, the multimodal transportation plan, the tourism plan are also kind of in the works. So there's a couple of pieces that I think would really be nice to have as a part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
More comment or thoughts? And then just to be clear, the question before the board is, questions before the board, does the Board of Trustees want more information on the process for, is one question. And would the Board of Trustees like to consider home rule for Nederland? Is the other question. And I think I'm hearing an answer to the second one being, that we want some other things really that make more sense, and even the code audit has to happen for a bunch of reasons after the comp plan anyways, and that's something people would like to see beforehand. I guess, what about the first question though? Well, I guess what would be what kind of, Jennifer, what kind of commitment goes into delivering the first question, which is, does the BOT want more information on the process for home rule?
Well, I think, it sounds to me there isn't more information that's wanted on the process, but more information wanted on potential benefits for the town.
Yeah.
And I could spend some time on that. I could do something that wouldn't take a ton of time. I'm trying to think what type of resources I have that I could share with you all that are general from other communities, other benefits. It would take more time to do a little bit of a deeper dive to figure out what the benefits would be for Nederland. But I could definitely do a high level of, here's some things that other communities have done for home rule. It just comes up a lot. Like, the state has adopted land use regulations, and land use is typically a matter of local control. But statutory towns don't have any ability to make an argument that the state has done something wrong, whereas home rule municipalities then do have that ability to say the state has done something wrong in adopting legislation that impacts local land use decisions. But there's so many examples.
To me, that would be beneficial too, is just learning more about the pros and the cons in a more depth and more specific to Netherland. Because, you know, some of these examples, even one that was called out in the comment, that's really not something we necessarily are interested in as much as it was just an example of what other people do. But I think talking about pros and cons for Netherland, learning more about that would be helpful as we go into our strategic planning and talk about it.
And maybe I could work with John, and we could come up with a list of things for that strategic planning that would be beneficial to Netherland.
We could put this on the agenda for that meeting, and I think, as you said, it came up kind of late in the process in the last one, and I'd like to make sure that it should be one of the things we think about. We should know whether we want to do this or not at the end of that strategic planning effort, I think, or at least a good idea that we want to explore it further. So this could be one of the agenda items for that meeting, and in the meantime, we can work on maybe a very high level of that audit and just some of those benefits, so that we can bring that forward either in another discussion item like this or at that plan.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, we may go the same way we did before, but it came up, it kind of, for some, whatever, I mean, frankly, talking to the people around the last board, there were 4 members that wanted to really pursue home rule, but it didn't get brought up in the strategic planning. And so when it was kind of thrown out at the end, as we were kind of finalizing our priorities, Nicole brought up the point, let's focus on what we've already done. And I say all but one of us agreed with her, so everyone backed down on it. But, you know, I think there was a appetite for it, but it wasn't introduced into the process early enough for a good decision to be made.
So
it might be that we decide not now again too. But
maybe we could spend some staff resources to prepare those documents for you, and then we'll bring it forward for you to have some more consideration, dive deeper.
Thank you.
What would be the process for the audit of the code audit? Because that's obviously, you guys don't have time for that as staff. Is that like we hire on a part-time person, or?
I think
What?
that'd be a BOT decision about how you want to handle it. We may possibly be able to get grant funding to get a consultant to do it. And in some ways, that's a not terrible plan, because they'd be just kind of reviewing it from a 10,000 foot, not tied to anything, but they could just kind of look at the tables and make sure everything makes sense and is modern. But we could probably.
Wouldn't you have to do that? I mean, isn't a legit audit involve a third party, you know, versus our own audit?
Well, I'm definitely
I
in
think
favor.
probably some planning departments do it, but I think it might take us significantly longer to get through the process than it would if we had a consultant. And I think the consultant price is probably not that significant, but I could do a little bit of research and bring this back to you about what, you know, I have no doubt we could get it done. It's just a matter of with everything else we're doing. So I could let me get a little bit more information about that for you.
Okay. I was just thinking, because with the budget season coming up soon, it'd be nice to have that kind of talked about a few times before the end of the year.
Okay.
That's just what I think, but thank you.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, home rule or not, we want to do the audit, so. Any other, do you have the direction you need?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. And with that, we go to our last third and final discussion item of the evening about EV, status of our EV chargers.
Well, Mayor and trustees, on the very first day I started work, the very first project I was given was our level 2 charger wasn't working properly. And by that, I mean that it was just giving everyone free charging because it wasn't talking to ChargePoint. The head unit was damaged. And so the board had budgeted last year approximately $58,000 from charging revenue. The other problem was the level 3 charger had some significant delays getting installed. So if you've been to the visitor center a lot lately, you've seen that infrastructure is all in place. They're doing the final switch over on the electrical cabinet for the new level 3 charger, which is a little bit more, there's a little bit different equipment needed for that. So there was some work there, but we should see that charger turn on pretty soon. We did, however, get the level 2 charger on August 7th, and I've been kind of watching the data, and it has not performed as we thought. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's also been some community pushback about the cost of charging, and it is significantly higher than you see average around this kind of Boulder area where you're in like the 32 to 36 cent range for a level 2 charger. We're currently charging 40, and then the plan is to charge 50 cents for the level 3. So my staff report has some fiscal analysis I did, just really kind of, and this is still based on assumptions because obviously we don't have enough data to really say for sure how busy they're going to be. So I'm kind of going off community sentiment that everybody's saying it's too high, and the fact that we're seeing really low charging time periods on the charger itself. And so I've been kind of thinking that what we may want to do is think about adjusting these rates. I think it's probably unlikely that we're going to generate the kind of revenue that our assumptions were based on last year. And I don't think that they were wrong assumptions. We just didn't have anything to base them off of. But now that we do, I am requesting a little bit of direction about whether or not you would be interested in adjusting those rates to be more in line with a competitive average. I think that could have a couple of benefits for us. You know, we do have a significant sales tax base. And when people can charge and they have time to go explore and do the things while they're charging, they're apt to spend money and generate sales tax, which is good for our businesses, good for the people who work in our businesses, and good for the town. And so I think that we could potentially lower our rates a little bit and we'd still see positive economic impact from those chargers. I've also been exploring the ChargePoint app, and there are ways to build community benefits into those chargers. So we could, in theory, give people who live in Nederland, similar to the EcoPass program, like some other structure like that, which, to be honest, I've not put together yet. I just know you could do it. Or where people might have a certain amount of charging a month, like or a code that they could get that would allow them to charge a certain amount for free. And so I just wanted to see if that might be something you guys would be interested in as well. My analysis, just to be clear, my electricity costs, I just based it on the Boulder average. And then I'm just thinking about like our costs to replace that equipment at some point. I don't think that that's an imminent cost that we have to cover, but I do like the idea personally of the chargers being able to pay for themselves long term if we don't have grants to replace them. So I built my assumptions for revenue cost recovery assumptions on a full cost recovery scenario where we're charging $2.20 an hour or 32 cents a kilowatt, which is a little bit more accurate way to do it. For the level 2 charger, that's right in line with what we see all over Boulder County and in like kind of Arvada and Jeffco, North Jeffco. And then for the level 3 charger, $17.50 an hour, which is, or 50 cents, which is exactly where we're at. That's right on what we should be. And that's like what people are expecting to pay because you charge so much quicker. If we're just thinking about operating costs, I think we could charge $0.25 a kilowatt hour on both machines and probably come out okay. That's covering our electricity costs and some maintenance costs. Although for the level 3, we were probably kind of fairly close there. I estimated annual revenue just based on the initial assumptions we had at about 5,000 for the level 2 and 36,500 for the level 3. Although I think it's likely that if we get the rates in the sweet spot, we may see more extensive use of those chargers, which could raise those rates. So that's where we might start seeing that money come towards what we budgeted last year. So I have a couple of direction requests here. Do you guys want to consider a community benefit program? Do we want to think about adjusting these rates annually as we look at electricity costs and have more trend data? And then there's a question about the fee schedule. These are a part of our fee schedule, and that is adopted annually. And we are going through, Macy is doing a project right now to kind of, to use the word again, audit our fees, make sure they're all correct. And these are in there. So that usually happens, I believe, in October that you would approve that fee schedule. So I've kind of been thinking that we might want to just do this at that time, although we could potentially change just this and then bring the whole fee schedule back to you again. But I think it might be a little cleaner just to do it once. So those are kind of in a nutshell what I've got in my staff report. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
I've got one to start. I know that someone is pursuing paid parking. How is that going to work in conjunction with the chargers? Are users of the charge point expected to then pay for parking as well? Or is it if you're charging and actively using the charger, does that cover your parking cost?
You can do it either way. Park Mobile, which is the app most likely to be used here, can integrate with ChargePoint. So you can do it through ChargePoint itself, or you can, there's a couple different ways to handle it. But I think it just comes down to what you guys would like to see. You know, there's a lot of ways to provide incentive to people who may be spending money in the town. And I think that's an important thing to consider, but we can do it whatever you guys feel comfortable
I'm
with.
worried about kind of that double charging. Somebody wants to charge and then they got to pay parking on top, you know, just so you can.
Yeah, we can combine it and probably just put And in that case, what we might do is just put the cost of electricity on top of the charge or something like that.
On top of the, not on top of the charge, but on top of the
Yeah, like
parking cost.
probably like, because the cost to the town is like 15 cents a kilowatt, but, or approximately 15 cents a kilowatt. But depending on how we could change that too. We don't have to charge that, or we could. It just depends on this rate structure, I think. But that's a board decision as well, how you'd want to do that.
More questions for John? Tanya, Nicole, do you have any clarifying questions?
Nope.
Okay,
I got one.
go for it.
John, I'm assuming you'll know this. Does, I forget the name of our parking partner, Park America, something like that?
Interstate.
Interstate parking. Do they offer like charge EV parking places?
Yes, and we did this in Idaho Springs, so we have a model from there that I know would work. And there's other ones like at Coors Field, they do, I think they just charge on the charger itself when you're there, and it's a little bit higher than it is in other places. But there's 3 or 4 models that they could use that is already in their system.
Okay. So that's something we could expand into with them if we wanted.
There's no other clarifying questions. We'll go to public comment on EV charging rates. If you like, yeah, Jim.
Jim Navratil again of Big Springs. Has the town ever discussed anything about solar collectors of using, getting the electrons from the sun?
I actually considered putting that in my staff report. There is several chargers that operate in our region that are fully solar powered. Bojo's has several that work, and they're free to the public. And that would be a way of reducing our costs even further and probably align with our sustainability goals. And we could probably find funding for that, but we haven't really done the research for me to be specific about it.
Cool. That's good to learn. Thanks, John. Thanks, Jim. Folks online, any public comments on EV charging rates? Okay, not hearing any. We'll bring it back to the board. Question before the board. Does the board want staff to explore a community charging program offering free or subsidized charging for residents and town employees? One question. Number 2 is, would the BOT be interested in adjusting the rate structure that was set last year, 40 cents per kilowatt hour for the level 2 charging and 50 cents per kilowatt hour for the level 3 charger? And if so, if yes, would the BOT like to do this as part of the annual review of town fees or sooner? More questions or discussion?
I think, I like the community program, certainly, benefiting our residents over tourists. Big fan of that. But I do think also, we probably should look at reducing the fees we're paying. It is a little excessive. I know, personally, having my first electric car, I've quit using it. But I think we shouldn't wait until the fee schedule takes effect with the new budget. I'd like to see it happen a little sooner. We can implement it with the fee schedule, but especially since as we're coming into leaf peeper season, we want to encourage more people to stop and be able to stop and top up with the level 3 that's come in. So
Part of the logic would maybe be to treat the leaf peepers a little nicer on the EV charger.
I mean,
Okay.
I think it's a good idea to kind of go with what the trend is, and especially within our own county, just a little easier for people to digest when they come from Boulder to Nederland, and it's the same price or close to. I also like the idea of for the electric vehicles being charged, that it could be looped into that, so it's not, again, easily digested by somebody who's going to come and charge their vehicle up here.
Hey, John, I apologize. I should have asked this in the previous Q&A, but so what you're proposing is that we change it to what? That we change the level 2s to 32 cents per kilowatt hour?
Yeah, I proposed that we do an annual review of this, but based on the data I have right now, I think that's the best price because we cover our cost and our recovery costs. If we didn't care about replacing that equipment in 10 to 15 years, whenever it is, we could go lower, like down to maybe 25 cents. I would be reluctant to go below 25, but I think somewhere between 25 and 35 cents is probably about right. And I think I was kind of thinking 32 cents because that's what they charge in Louisville and in Superior and in most places in Boulder. So I was kind of thinking that was a good number.
Okay, yeah, because it seems that it's kind of stratified within Boulder. Like, I mean, yes, I mean, it goes up as high as, what is it, 45 cents in Boulder, if I'm
Yeah.
looking.
And they have time-based ones on their level 3s that are right in the downtown core that are like 15 minutes only, which is not really enough to actually do much for a view. I mean, a little bit, but
Yeah, it says
but
level
that's the other thing
3.
we could do.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it says level 3 is 45 cents per kilowatt hour for the first 30 minutes and then 25 cents for each additional minute. So, yeah, so I guess they kind of level it out that way. Okay, but you said what you're requesting is 32 cents for that level 2, and then the level 3 you're proposing it stays the same at 50
Yeah,
cents?
I think that the only other thing I was saying is if we decided we didn't need to do a full cost recovery here, which we wouldn't replace things, I think we could get away with like the 25-cent cost because that's probably closer to our actual operating cost. So, where we're at right now, probably on the level 3, we'll eventually replace it when it needs to be replaced, and we'll provide some revenue for the town. And I don't think it's too high for a level 3 charger, although that's just my thought because it's like it's basically a 2 to 3 hour charge. Well,
Right.
for some vehicles.
Yeah. And so, okay, so we'd be leaving that the same, but then just dropping from 40 cents to 32 cents on the level 2.
Yeah.
Hmm. Um, hmm. I mean, it really is kind of all over the place. And you said that these numbers were pulling, because even like here in Boulder, for some of the level 2s, it's at $1, for the first 2 hours. But you're saying that these numbers were from Louisville and where?
Yeah. I pulled them off of the ChargePoint app too. So they're average. So you're going to see higher and lower. But this is kind of what I was just looking at. I was not looking at it as a revenue builder for the town on itself. I was thinking of more the economic impact of people coming and spending dollars in businesses. And so like having trying to keep that price at a level where they're going to charge their car for 2 to 3 hours is what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. What are the impacts of having the community share piece?
That is something that I'm not sure about yet. I don't think we've seen the level of usage yet that indicates that those chargers are full all the time. One challenge we have is that car share, that Subaru Altera is parked in the wrong spot. We need to do a better job of figuring out where that thing parks because it does block a space. So we may find, that's kind of what I was thinking, like an annual review. But again, my math is based on not even a full month of data. So the other option would be is we could try to get another month of data here and see what it looks like. But and I don't want to be too reactive, but we just had a pretty significant community feedback about the 40 cents per kilowatt hour thing.
I think we should acknowledge that feedback at least because it was pretty significant, and I think they're definitely pushing back on that much for a level 2 charger, and they seem to be more focused on how much it would cost tourists who are going to come into their businesses and spend money. What other thoughts do folks have? Well, exploring the questions before the board are on page 61, top of page 61. Does the BOT want staff to explore a community charging program offering free or subsidized charging for residents and town employees? Would the BOT be interested in adjusting rate schedules
Lower the price to be competitive ASAP, maybe not wait, but I don't think we should get into the community sharing piece. I don't think we should rush into that because I don't know. I mean, we can't compare it to the Eco Pass because the Eco Pass has a property tax addition that funds it, and this would not have that. So it would be basically revenue out of our budget of potential revenue, and also we're paying for the electricity, I imagine. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's free electricity. I'm not sure, but so I don't want to rush into the community sharing bit, but I do want to lower the cost and make them competitive. I think we could do that. We could just agree to that as soon as possible and not have to wait till October, but also October is a month away. So if that's easier for staff, I'm fine with just having it then.
If we waited until October, would it go into effect immediately then, or what is the timeline like after that?
We could do it as soon as the fee schedule is adopted, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you could get some direction to just change it.
We usually adopt the fee schedule along with our budget
Yeah.
on the first meeting or second meeting of December.
Can we change it now with the assumption it'll be adopted in the fee schedule, or?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it a resolution, you could have, bring back a resolution to amend the fee schedule for these rates. I think that would be sufficient.
Others, what are you thinking?
I'm actually in support of exploring the community charging program. I agree with Trustee Larson. We were thinking about doing this for paid parking as well, so I don't see it being much different either way.
Have all the program information I need to give you about that program and what it would look like. I could bring that back at a future discussion item if you were to think about these two items separately.
Yeah,
And bring that back just to give you a better idea of what it would look like in fiscal impact.
That'd be good to have some real numbers for that. I kind of like, if we're going to consider, I kind of agree with Tanya on dropping the price for level 2 charger. And frankly, I'd rather do it before the peeper season than after, because the pushback that we got before was mostly on the cost to tourists. And it'd be nice to have people have a good taste in their mouth coming through this fall. That's my thinking. It's like for a month's worth of data, I'd rather people have a good taste in their mouth about Ned.
I mean, one thing to keep in mind, if dropping the level 2 charger from 40 cents to 32 cents per kilowatt hour, that charger's a 6 kilowatt charger. So you're saving 36 cents an hour on your charging. And, your typical tourist might be parking there for 3 hours, 2-3 hours. So we're talking about a savings to a tourist of $1.
Yeah, and maybe the tourists don't care as much as the people complaining about it. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention.
Yeah, did we actually hear from tourists? I feel like this was started, from a thread in Facebook off somebody who was already sort of pissed off about some of the other things that were being enacted recently, such as with like the grease traps and everything. And so, I mean, did we get this from like an actual like tourist coming through?
I've had a couple of conversations with people on the street, but not a lot. And that's kind of the thing is the other option would be we've only got almost a month of data right now. We could let it run for a little bit and see what happens. And this could happen, this resolution process could happen later once we do have more significant data.
On the other hand, it's $1 to us too, right? So it's $1 to us, but we have people that might not have that sticker shock and might not have that bad taste in their mouth being here and going, like parking for a few hours while seeing the leaves. So
yeah, it's not going to make a lot of it's not going to break the town's budget getting that extra 6 cents a kilowatt hour, but not charging the 40 cents, going back to sort of the cost recovery model, that fits in better with our stated sustainability goals and the things we're trying to do and trying to encourage it instead of saying, hey, we're going to get every penny out of everyone who comes through here. And I still think we should reduce it to the cost recovery model that Jonathan proposed.
So, any other folks want to talk to that in the room, or if, Tanya, you had said reduce it, but, you know, what, do we have a nod of 4 on one?
Can I just,
It's just,
a quick
or
question?
work discussion is fine.
Sorry, John. So the 50 kilowatt hour for the level 3, I'm sorry, I'm sure that you said this already, but that's on par with what we're seeing in Boulder as well. That just seems high as well, but
It does, but it's significantly faster is why. So you can, I don't know what it is on your car. Mine can charge in less than an hour on a level 3.
perfect.
It depends on the quality of the level 3. I mean, I think ours is going to be a 50 kilowatt level 3. So a typical electric car, you know, pick your model, is running about 100 kilowatt or 80 to 100 kilowatt battery. So 200, you know, 100, you're getting 2 hours fully charged, and a lot of people aren't needing a full charge by the time they get here.
And some of those can be 8 hours on a level 2.
I feel
Go ahead.
ambivalent. I feel like we could just get some more data and just see how things are trending. I don't really feel strongly one way or the other. I mean, it's a dollar difference. If I I just, yeah, I have a hard understanding that that's going to make a real big impact in the mindsets of our tourists who are coming here. I'm having a hard time seeing that.
Yeah, it's a dollar difference based on that sort of typical 2 hour, 3 hour stay of a tourist. I do know our residents who use the charger, like Jonathan was saying, you know, a 6 to 8 hour charge, where somebody is putting in 80 kilowatts or 68 kilowatts of energy. At that point, there you're now talking about, you know, $10. So
Sure. And
residents who are using it overnight charges.
I think the thing is when you look at the averages, and they should have put this in my staff report, but then what people are just trying to do is compare it to the cost of a gallon of gas. And I think one of the things I know about when tourists come is that a lot of things don't matter, and you can charge them everything, but they notice when that happens, and then they say things, and it's overcome, like, because people are not gonna stop coming here because of it. But sometimes, like, those little perception things could be the difference between somebody spending, 5 minutes here and grabbing something from the bakery or something, or maybe walking down First Street and, like, checking out what's over there. Because, we all have little irritations that happen when we see that kind of stuff. And so if you think, oh, well, Estes Park isn't that far away, I'm just gonna go there. That's what we want to try to avoid. And so I think you're 100% right. This may be the right fee structure for us, but it's just good to have this conversation, I think, either way about what
Sure.
we want to
Yeah.
do.
And and the thing I keep thinking of is like they're essentially they're not paying a parking spot either. Like that's an added bonus. Like we're trying to push the sustainability piece. They don't have to pay the parking fee. This is what they have to pay. And they have a dedicated spot oftentimes. So
Well, I think they're still paying parking eventually if we ever do that.
Yeah, or if they're parking it, well, yeah.
But yeah,
for that spot, but we don't have to. We don't have to choose. They're not doing that right now. They wouldn't like.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
But they might be buzzing around town and seeing Ron's signs and assuming that's everywhere, and they see their little deal with, EV charging.
I
To me,
think. Go ahead.
go ahead.
I was thinking
You
for
go ahead.
the people who know the prices and they see it's a little higher, it could tick them off. And Jonathan's right; little things tick people off. And it's not about the money most of the time; it's more about the principle, and that irritates people. And the last thing we want is people getting irritated. And if it's just $1, let's just eat it ourselves and take the higher road on this one. That's where I'm at. So you have my nod.
Okay, thanks. We got 2 nods, 3 nods, 6 nods. I don't know where you're at now, Nicole, but I think yeah, I think we got a nod to go ahead, before the peeper season, to bring back what you need to a resolution for us to, if that's what's needed, to knock down the level 2 charger to 32 cents. Is that the number? Which also gives us money for future costs. And then keeping the level 3 as it is. What are we only going to have level 3s? What's going to happen like down the road?
We'll keep the level 2 because it was grant funded and it's paid for. Level 3 charger should come online soon. And then there's an opportunity, there's another $40,000 sitting out there that we could get another charger somewhere. I know we've talked, or there's been at least conversations about where that could go and how we would do that. And I don't have a great thought on where, because I think you need like 3-phase power. And so that's the big question, is where we'd fit that in. But I think with where we are in the whole scenic byway situation, we definitely want to make sure that we have the right amount of infrastructure here, because they're going to be coming more and more. And I think, there's always opportunities with even like Tesla and people like that are always looking to find places to do it. So I think we're going to want to think about also residents and where residents would charge if you don't have that infrastructure where you can pull off onto your lot and charge. Like, how are you going to do it in public? And I think that's something that mountain towns like Nederland are just going to have to be thinking about as more people adopt EVs, like where our public infrastructure for you people is.
Makes sense.
Hey, John, is it still scheduled by the end of this year to have the level 3 up and going?
Yeah, I think we're going to maybe 10 days out at the most.
Those guys were working on it today.
Yeah, they've cabinet built, all the equipment's in it, and I think they're just testing everything to make sure it's safe. So I think we'll see that
fabulous.
very, very soon.
Okay.
So, and on that first bullet, does the board want staff to explore a community charging program? Are we, what I heard was like, we need more numbers, I think, and then as part of our exploration, so we could decide where we go with that. And the third thing I would like to throw out another bullet is, I like that, Jim's question and your answer that, these solar powered options is something you were meant to put on here. Are people interested in learning more about that? I am. Because if it's free pass, if it's, quote unquote free, this is a whole different resource. Cool. So check that out too. Thanks. Any other, need anything else on this, John?
No, thank you all.
Okay, great. Thank you. With that, we'll go to public comment on non-agenda items. We have some comments that were turned in. They're in the packet. And there's no one in the room. If anyone online has any public comments on non-agenda items, now is your time. You got 3 minutes. Hearing none, we'll go to other business. And I just have one thing. So Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest went from stage 2 to stage 1 fire restrictions at noon today. And that covers like 5 different counties on the side of the Continental Divide, from Clear Creek up to Weld. And I saw Andrew Jocelyn this morning, and I think he was assuming the county was going to do that. I haven't looked online yet. And he had also advised us to just follow the county. So, John, you probably have talked to him.
Yeah, that's the intention, is that we'd always just, well, I think unless there was extenuating circumstances, we'd always just follow the county recommendation there. So
we've decreased our fire restrictions from stage 2 to stage 1, and Griffin County went to it back in August, that kind of thing.
I didn't talk to Andrew today, but if that's what they did, then I think that's what we should do in the morning.
He was like going in, he was dropping off his kids, and he's like, I'm going to check my emails and figure it out right now.
Sheriff did it earlier today.
Okay.
Boulder County Sheriff dropped to stage 1 for everything west of 93 Broadway. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay.
We'll follow that.
Okay.
As long as that's okay with the board.
And that historically has been an administrative decision, but we were just talking it through over last week. Any other business? Any random motions this time of night?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We got motion and second. No time for discussion.
All right. Mayor Billy?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon?
Can't hear you, Tanya.
Yeah, yes.
Trustee Ty?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling?
Yes.
Trustee Maris?
Yes.
And Trustee Larson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The meeting adjourned at 8:58 PM.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Good night.